the code.
Sorry.
No, all good. You could put in the code 31342551, and you're able to also interact that way. And you could send some hearts. If there's something that's really resonating with you, you can absolutely send hearts. There's an opportunity for you to send like question marks. We're going to use the question marks as like, oh, this is a new learning. I would love to explore more about that learning. And then also we have this thumbs up button, which you can also be able to use as well. I love someone already sent some hearts, so that's great. And I am going to make sure that everything is good on my end. There we go. Awesome, awesome. So if you are in and if you want to go ahead and test it out and and share some hearts, you can feel free to. Thank you. And also, we will be on the chat as well. So don't feel like, oh, I'm missing out if I'm not specifically there on the Menti. Great. So we have a lot to cover. So let's go ahead and get started. If you do not know who I am, I'm Brianna. I'm here in Atlanta. We talked a little bit earlier about me playing dinosaurs with my 4 and 5 year old. I love to thrift. I'm a woman of faith. I really like chai tea and matcha, and I've gotten into it over the past couple of years. And I even bought my own set and looked up the history, and I love that for me now. I am all about community care, Black joy, and toddler life because that consumes me right now. And so, any chance that I get to navigate and connect with fellow folks in the field, I feel blessed and I'm thrilled. And with connecting the cause, one of the things that resonates with me so much is the fact that I had been in volunteer engagement. I started off as an AmeriCorps member, and I continued to follow that path. I was in marketing a little bit in AmeriCorps, and I hated it. It's so funny because sometimes we don't want to tell our horror stories of service. And I will say 100% I was in the wrong position when it came to marketing. But what I did love is I loved telling stories and I loved sharing stories. And so as I continued to connect in the field and continue to be around community, one of the things I loved was to be able to hear folk stories. I also love to be able to um, ignite people, to connect people to causes they care about. And that really sort of kind of sparked this moment for me, even more particularly when I was in college and I was able to do some study abroad and do some service learning. And I come back to the US and I'm fired up and I'm excited. And I continuously see that the ways in which I treated and could have perpetuated some harm in other places, like while I was on the service learning trips, while I was doing service learning in different places in the world, I had to come to an aha moment that me taking pictures of kids in orphanages without their permission, without their autonomy, me doing things that were harmful to the neighborhoods and to the communities, that I came back here and realized that the same thing was happening to my community as well. And it was one of those aha moments where I felt this juxtaposition of I want to be in spaces and places in service where volunteerism is centered around community. But wait a second, I caused harm in someone else's community. And so having to navigate what that looks like and what that did for me, it made me want to go and pursue in the nonprofit sector. And also when I showed up in the nonprofit sector, and I start hearing, of course, governance and KPIs and volunteer hours and all of these things that sort of kind of felt a little bit different. Well, a lot of bit different from how I grew up and what service looked like. It has been my purpose and passion to get back to that service of neighbors helping neighbors and people being able to connect in real and mutual ways. And so, with our time today, I want us to either read this, I'm going to say this out loud. I want us to frame our time. We believe in community in all its forms, and we are connected to an organization or organizations that were created to amplify and support community. But creating harm towards the communities we serve and partner alongside can derail that mission and our own. So then we must consistently and fervently ask ourselves, what am I doing to carry out harm that derails that holistic mission? What parts of that must I be accountable to for creating that harm? And what can I do in my power to repair and rebuild? And so, as we're going through our conversation today, as we're navigating the co-dreaming framework and what that looks like, we can continue to go back and ask ourselves these questions. So, I mentioned this a little earlier today. We're going to be introducing the co-dreaming framework. I will say you all are the third group of people that have ever seen this. And so I would love, love, love to hear your thoughts, hear your feedback, hear your musings, how it is sitting with you. And also we're going to go through some reflection and then we're going to have some Q&A and comments towards the end. So one thing I love to start off with is today and every day, you have permission to interrogate the good. We know that volunteerism is a place and a space for us to connect. We know that everyone doesn't have everything. And so it is a place and a space for us to grow together, for us to meet each other where we are, for us to have mutual connection, right? We know that it is a place for us to connect to causes and issues that we care about and to interact within those. And it is okay to think about what ways can we do this better? What traditional ways have we done this in the past that may have not been the best? What are we considering best practices to some that are not best practices to others? We have to look and say, if we love volunteerism so much, if we appreciate what it does for our communities, for our neighbors, for the world, then we have to also navigate, how do we ensure that we do not commit past harms, past trauma as we are navigating volunteerism? And I know that there are even, some folks who have never heard the words harm and volunteerism even in the same sentence. And today also, this may be your first time that you're going to hear the words volunteer and liberation in the same sentence. And so even that juxtaposition of, in what ways have you seen volunteerism create these unhealthy power imbalances? I know that when I was a volunteer engager, and I was specifically for a while in refugee resettlement, one of the things that my boss continued to ask me over and over again after every shift, were the volunteers happy? Did they seem excited? Were they energized and pumped? And rarely did we have conversations on, was there anything that seemed to challenge volunteers about anything that you shared or expressed about our refugee neighbors? Were they feeling a sense of accomplishment, but they also realized that there's so much more to do? And there was a moment of their happiness, right? The way that she was framing that question, their happiness was the goal of my job. Them coming back over and over again was the goal. Them being the heroes of the stories was the goal. And when she asked me those questions, and when I would say yes, they walked around happy, they seemed great. Yeah, we had a good time. There was something inside of me that's like, I want to challenge them in their perceptions. I want to challenge them in the ways they think about volunteerism. I want to challenge the way they think about community. And it's okay that they did a good thing. And it's okay that they are challenged about their perceptions, because what ends up happening oftentimes is we can have a very transactional experience where we serve food to those who need food, and we give clothes to those who need clothes. And at the same time, we walk away with the same perceptions, and we don't get to change the narrative of what that community, what the good is in the community, how the community shifts and change in terms of their solutions. And so this is why we all should have permission to interrogate the good. That if we love volunteerism and understand its outcomes, that we also have to assess the good of it, the not so good of it, the complicatedness of it when we think about other communities. We have to think about the times where I've had countless stories of Black folks being connected within community, and then their autonomy is stripped away. Their stories are extracted for a pat on the back for a corporate group. Those times where I've had to justify and switch all of the plans for a group to come in when that particular opportunity that they want to do doesn't actually match the success and the flourishing and that definition of success that the community has. But we know that there's a check attached to this, or we know that there is funding attached, and we have to justify it in our heads, right? So it is okay to navigate this in a real way. What I want to think about here is we see these two images, right? And I just want to quickly take a moment with these two images and really explore the juxtaposition between the two. So I'm going to take a pause, and I want you to take a look at these two images. One's having loops a little bit, the other one is a bit less loopy. And I want us to explore the fact that sometimes volunteerism can feel like a lot of the loops, and sometimes volunteerism can feel like this very orderly piece of effectiveness. And I want us to be able to embrace both in our walks, in our profession, in volunteerism. That it's funny, one time I was doing this and I was like, what did this left side of the loops feel like to you? And people were like, it's chaotic and too much is going on, and it's confusing. And then the other side, some people say, oh, well, that's orderly. That calms my brain. That feels more effective. That's easier. And then someone spoke up and said, well, actually, the loops feel like a dance. And the loops feel like, what community feels like oftentimes. And I was like, yes, let's not lose the innovation and the flexibility and the osmosis and the let's see what happens in our work, because that is how community oftentimes operates. I'm not saying one is better than the other. What I am saying is sometimes we need the dance and we need to be okay with the dance. And other times we do need this clarity, because clarity is kind. And so, what I want us to do is try to lean into both of those today, and us try to navigate what feels best for certain things when it comes to our work, when it comes to community. If there are times that we are trying to shift and mold community or clients or volunteers into this very rigid shape, when you are feeling it sort of kind of bust out the seams and it's not really working, maybe we should lean a little more into the dance, lean a little bit more into the flexibility. When there is a feeling of unclarity, and that unclarity is causing there to be confusion, maybe there does need to be a little bit more of the ebb and flow of a more concise plan. And so, as we look at our co-dreaming framework today, I want us to be able to navigate that in a way where it feels natural to community and sometimes uncomfortable for us, and then vice versa. So, when we think about co-dreaming, Deb, it's funny because I don't know if you're going to find a lot about co-dreaming if you Google it. There's not a long history or some white papers on it, specifically because I
AI helped me.
AI helped. Oh, wow. Okay. So AI has a little bit of my work. Okay, awesome. So when we're navigating co-dreaming, I want us to land sort of kind of on this definition. So co-dreaming is a framework that I created some time ago, and we're going to lean into the definition, and I'm going to pause and see if there's anyone who has any thoughts or questions or what's landing with you about this. And then we're going to actually look at a visual framework of it and go into the details of what it entails. So co-dreaming is a community centric approach to volunteerism where it identifies and works to uproot harmful traditional practices. And it calls us to name the root causes of why and how formal volunteerism exists in the first place, how it currently holds up and can perpetuate white supremacy culture, power hoarding, and saviorism. Now, when I was thinking about the framework, one of the things that I was really navigating was there's a piece for me in volunteerism that is missing. There's a lot of people talking about retention, recognition, and recruitment, and the best practices over and over and over again of how to get butts in seats, how to keep them appreciated, right? And how to keep them there. The other side I continued to hear when it came to volunteerism was how do we make sure that volunteers show up as appreciated when it comes to them being at the center? When I say that, I mean, what is their schedule? How do they like to be talked to? What is the volunteer? How can the volunteer handbook support volunteers? How can we make sure we're in a space where volunteers feel like they belong, where they feel welcome? One of the things I rarely heard was where is the end user experience, AKA the recipient, in all of this? And that is literally why volunteerism is occurring, because there is someone on the other end of that volunteering that we are serving and connecting with. But rarely do we ask, hey, community, hey, client, what was your experience with those volunteers? How do you see volunteerism? What is your definition of success and flourishing? And how do we create volunteer opportunities to meet that flourishing versus just meeting your needs, right? How do we navigate into the success of how you see yourself now and in the future? And it's not just based on volunteer happiness, joy, and experience. So this is where a lot of my co-dreaming started to occur, because I thought about me, myself, as a Black woman who has experienced volunteers coming into my community who are not from my community, who are from a different place, It felt like a descendance upon my community, and then it felt like a jetting out. But they took pictures and they had the t-shirts, and it was a feeling of deep extraction. So that was a first place that I felt that. A second place I felt that of where I belong as a community member in this place of service is when I was actually looking up places of, oh, I want to study abroad, or I want to volunteer abroad. And when I would look at the ads, when I would research it, when I would see recruitment materials and marketing materials, I was the person that was always being served. I was not the person in the ad that was doing the serving. It was always somebody else serving people who looked like me. So when you see that constantly, there is a there's this narrative of dependency that is pushed instead of a narrative of partnership and codependency. There had never been, in all of my years of working in volunteerism and in spaces of service, where there was a survey to ask about, hey, community members, how did you experience this opportunity? How did you experience volunteers in this space? Hey, a volunteer group just came. Tell me about your experience with them. Hey, we're thinking about a new volunteer opportunity. Does that sit well with you? Is that even something you want to do? Right? And so having to navigate that space, I was like, you know what? When it comes to co-dreaming, I not only want people to know me based off of my needs, I want people to know me based off of my dreams. And because I want people to know me based off of my dreams, they have to be in relationship with me to do that. And the opportunities and the experience have to be based off of that preferred future. And that is the reason that I created co-dreaming and that co-dreaming exists, because I want our communities to serve as neighbors together and to know me not just based off of what I don't have right now. And so, as we are thinking about this, we first have to understand why this exists in the first place, as far as this power hoarding and the saviorism. We have to start to deconstruct the ways we center volunteer preferences and organizational systems, and start thinking about how do we commune with community and utilize volunteerism as a way to be able to do that, and which requires that deep relationship and that honorable stewardship, right? And we have to work towards a now and a future that centers the community as those drivers of the solution and who hold that power and that wisdom. I always try to say in volunteer orientations towards the latter part of my years, there is already good here. This is the good that is here. And I explicitly communicated the good that's happening. And volunteers, today you can bring your good and you get to partner with that good that already exists. That switches the mindset and the dialogue, right? From thinking, oh, I'm coming in really quickly for this one day to try to navigate, this particular issue, versus, oh, I am a cultivator and a steward of the good that's already taking place. And I get to partner with that today. So when we think about centering the community, oftentimes, and I've just communicated mostly all of this, think of this as being the solar system. We have the sun right here in the middle. And oftentimes in our works, subconsciously, we can have the gravitational pull of everything else be either volunteers, donors, or board members. We construct our meanings, our thinkings, our systems so that volunteers, donors, and board members, their preferences, their governance, the way they do things are front and center. And then we end up having community out here as a planet that is being gravitationally pulled, right, by those whims, by that direction, by that decision making. But then I'm going to switch it really quick. Got to catch it. Boom. You see the change, you see the shift. Community is now at the center of this work. And so, what does that specifically mean? It doesn't mean that volunteers are here, donors are here. We have volunteer roles, board members. We are reorienting everything to navigate the way that community sees success, their flourishing, and what deep relationship looks like. What Breauna is not saying is that volunteers don't matter. What I'm not saying is that donors don't matter. What I'm saying is now they are put in their right and particular place in order to support community, which is the reason they're there in the first place, right? So we are needing to do a reorientation of where community connects, how we connect, and how they lead our decision making. Okay, so pause. I think the framework is about to come up and it's a lot. Okay, but we're going to work through it together. It's a big picture and it has a lot, it has a fair amount of words, but we're going to go through and explain it together. Okay, boom, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to pause and I'm just going to have you take a look at it for a little bit. And then I just want to open up the opportunity to be able to share um, what sort of kind of resonating with you, what words are popping up from you, even as far as our, this last set of conversation that we just had, how it's relating to you in the work of co-dreaming and as we look at this framework. So I'm going to pause and here I'm just going to give you a orientation here. Awareness and naming the harm is sort of kind of the first step, and we go this way through towards liberation and action. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to let you digest this a little bit. And if anyone has digested some and you have questions or thoughts or something that's popping up, you can share. And we are going to go through, I am going to go through each of these individually for the rest of our time. And then we'll open up for some more questions and reflection. Donna, hey,
Hi, I'm sure there's going to be time after, but I just thought I'd jump in if there's a minute.
please.
Because, yeah, it's really, this is actually the second time I've heard you present. I think it was a few years ago, the first time. It's always great. Thank
Oh,
you.
Donna, thank you.
Yeah, I just had this brain wave because I work in healthcare and I mean, healthcare, usually these organizations have been around a really long time and so have their volunteer programs. So sometimes you just kind of walk in and there's pre-existing volunteer positions that you recruit for and they get filled and executed with varying degrees of success. So I just feel like, some of them have been around for a long time. And it just kind of made me think, I'm starting to think like, what would it look like in our like healthcare provider community to do a survey, maybe in the community, maybe in our like among, I don't know how that would work, but yeah, like what would clients and families want to see as volunteer positions in our healthcare organization? Like, I think probably there's always going to be a need for friendly visiting when family can't be there. And,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'd be curious to see what other things maybe we haven't thought of that they are maybe dreaming about. Yeah, just a thought.
Yeah, no, thanks, Donna. That's really good. I appreciate that. And I think what you just mirrored is something that I want to confirm and say is that it's a lot to think about historical harms. It's a lot to think about, you know, back in 1876, this thing occurred, and because it can go back far, right? And I really appreciate the fact that I always say, like, yes, there's a whole ocean. We're not trying to boil the whole ocean. We're not trying to, boil the big pot, but we can take a little spoonful, right? And see what we can do with that. And I love that there was a moment that you were like, wait a second, let's see if we can start there. What are people saying that we are not hearing, especially in institutions that have long histories, that not only have a physical footprint, but like a power footprint, right? Of like, there's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of decision making that is hierarchical, traditional. And so being able to start where you can in that particular space, I think is a wonderful start. And you may find that the opportunities that are there are have been navigated through time, and so there might be a confirmation of like, oh, is still something people want. And when we do surveys, there is a difference between asking like, what do you need versus what do you dream of, right? And so being able to also carry that nuance with being able to ask sort of kind of that question, because that gets down to flourishing, and that gets down to thriving versus just immediate action. So thanks, Donna. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
I put something in the comments. I would love you to just briefly walk us through like an example, just something you feel free to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, I also see you are in the chat. We do an annual survey to the people who live in the long-term care homes to get their feedback on current volunteer programs and their desires for changes, or new programs. But the what do you dream of is such a powerful prompt. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I think that there's some digging that we can do to get beyond the surface, to be able to navigate what that looks like. And also, depending upon our various degrees of separation, if there's an opportunity to have conversations with folks, even better, right? Versus and let the survey be complementary to that. Is there anybody else that had any thoughts before I walk through this in action? Any other thoughts? Just this coming up for me as I see this or as I think about things. Okay, great. Great, great, great. All right, let's go through this. So, number one, as you can see, before we even start, this is our starting point, awareness and naming the harm. But before we even start, there is an outer layer here that protects everything else in here, right? Which is community brilliance, autonomy, dignity, and honor. This is encapsulated here and sort of kind of the first thing you hit, because those are the things that are not negotiable. Okay. And so when we talk about and navigate what community brilliance, autonomy, dignity, and honor look like, there has to be a standing approach of, I believe that community brilliance is here. I believe that just because someone may be in need right now, it doesn't mean don't have solutions, or it doesn't mean they don't deserve autonomy. Dignity, we do not get to decide dignity, right? But dignity is already innate and given because they exist. So that is a very specific starting point, because if we see people as deficit, right? If we think about the hierarchy of the volunteers, the giver, these people are the given to, there is no connection, there's only separation, then we are not going to be able to do the rest of these pieces. Okay. So The awareness and the naming of the harm. Number one, it's being able to recognize and address how traditional volunteering can actually perpetuate harm. Here is a real life example of this. I came into a organization and I was tasked with creating a community conversation because we need to get folks in the room for a focus group for a community conversation. I was out in the community. I was passing out flyers. I was sending emails. I was doing all the things. And nobody showed up. When I said nobody, zero. And I worked on this for 4 months. So I'm like, I'm missing something. Like, am I missing something? It wasn't until I had more conversation and more conversation that I realized that the organization is not well respected in the community, number one. So the people they wanted to get a focus group with, they then tell me that they wanted to get a focus group together because they wanted to repair the relationship with the community. But that's not how you repair with the community, right? Getting them all in a room together and then trying to air out thoughts. It first begins of what harm did y'all commit in the first place? Who committed it? How was it committed? Let's name that. Let's share that. And it took me another set of months to get down to the nitty gritty of what it was. Now, when I came in the community and I had conversations, my first conversation was, I know this thing happened. And I know that this occurred. And because of that occurring, I understand that trust has been broken. So I want to understand what it looks like to repair and rebuild, right? We have to first be aware and we have to name. There's also another piece to this that in traditional practices, there are things that specifically support the volunteer that also diminish the community and their trust. There was something, another very practical example of this. When I do volunteer orientations, back in the day, there would be and I would attend volunteer orientations. There'd be a lot of communication on please put up your belongings, keep your doors locked. We're in a community. There's a lot of things going on. Keep your stuff safe and protected. You're not saying it, but you're saying it. Do you hear me? And so moving forward, as I continue to hear that, number one, you're guarding yourself against community. You're perpetuating the fact that they are violent potentially, that they are harmful to you potentially. So if we're starting off saying those things, how then are they framing their volunteer work and the people that are there? So instead, as I became a volunteer engager, I said, make sure you keep your things safe from everyone. Not you see what I'm saying? Not just oh, there's community, we're here, versus keep your things safe because you want to keep your stuff protected, right? There's a blanket statement versus having this really innuendo feeling. So these best practices of policy and procedure, having to navigate it in those ways. Naming the harm. The second piece of this is unlearning and shifting agency. I am now unlearning the ways that traditional volunteerism can perpetuate harm. What does it look like for me to unlearn those things and figure out what it means to start shifting community in the center by shifting that agency? One thing that I did that was very practical in one of my roles is I went down the list of my roles and responsibilities and I said to my, I did a little pie chart thing. I was like, okay, who makes certain decisions in my department? And how can these be, and how are these decisions that should actually be made through community innovation, through their input, and through their actual decision making, right? And so, me being able to do that allowed us to navigate the ways in which I can shift that agency. So, an example, Donna, of what you were talking about earlier, how do we shift agency? One of the things that I did to shift agency at an organization that I was doing consulting with is we decided that there was not it was a food bank, and they had a shopping experience component attached. So those who came to the food bank, it was set up like an actual grocery store, and it was a really beautiful program. And one of the things that we talked about was we are actually not getting the experience of the shoppers and how they would like to do things. So, what are we going to do so that our decision making just isn't on that team? The team was a team of three. They also felt really under supported. So, I was like, you have groups of allies, of people, of volunteers, and regular shoppers that come in. How about we make a committee to connect people and to share about decision making moving forward? So, what we did is we created an actual committee on volunteerism. And y'all, this was phenomenal because it had the volunteer team, it had different people who touch volunteerism in the organization, it had volunteers who were committed to the work, specifically to equity, and we had shoppers, and we were all on a committee together. And the sole purpose of the committee was not to steer the nonprofit, was not to navigate, certain things. We are specifically looking at volunteer policy, volunteer documents. We are looking at the shopper experience. We are talking about how to support volunteers in helping shoppers. We are deep diving into volunteer stuff, right? And when we were able to do that, we were able to see there was just a light of breath of fresh air for the team as far as their work, but also when it came to specifically the shoppers, when it came to the people who were on the committee, and we were able to assign ambassador roles to volunteers and to shoppers. And this created that sense of shifting agency. There was a trust there. What do you want to shift? What do you want to change? We were able to accomplish it. And guess what? It took 3 years to do. So let's be clear, right? This isn't a shake and bake. This isn't a one and done. This is years of practice. You may be on one of these for a specific period of time, and then it ends up going backwards, right? So that's an example of shifting agency. Then, now that we've shifted agency, how do we make sure that we reimagine our relationships with them, right? And that building authentic partnerships with others and with volunteers and community members, not based on transaction, but based on relationship. How do we continue to create an ecosystem versus not a hierarchy, right? As we're thinking about this honorable stewardship, in relationship, you're going to start hearing no, or you're going to start hearing this hurt my feelings, or you're going to start hearing this was happened in the past and I don't like it, right? That's a good thing. That's feedback. It's a good thing to be challenged because now you know you're in right relationship when somebody can say no, right? You know you're in right relationship when you can call on somebody and be like, hey, do you like this story that the newsletter is about to run about your experiences? No, I don't like it. Let's switch it up, right? Like that's a good thing because now when they bring up areas that there's been weakened trust, You can work on accountability and reparative action and how to structure community to really create methods and policies and practices for reparative action. Do you have a written down practice for if there is for a volunteer who has committed harm to a community member? Is there a specific practice that you embody of how to have a conversation to call a volunteer in or a community member in when they have caused harm? What is your plan for reparative action? Sometimes it doesn't have to be a specific, it doesn't have to be either or. Oh, we're going to dismiss you instantly. Sometimes you need to, as far as the severity. Sometimes it's not an automatic dismissal, and sometimes it's not, well, it wasn't that bad, right? We're just gonna not we're gonna avoid it all. But there has to be some type of reparative action moving forward. And then this last piece, liberation in action. This is what I wish us and I hope for us to get to one day, where our institutions, our nonprofits, our individuals, they are all connected to an ecosystem of care and we're all neighboring each other, right? And communities are thriving through their experiences with organizations, and they're also controlling their own ways of caring for each other and being able to, honestly, this liberation in action could be a whole, all of these could be a whole different, workshop. But this liberation in action is going to take time, commitment, flexibility, openness, vulnerability to really be able to get there. Because that means that y'all are connected with entities and partners that believe what you are navigating. And also, there is an openness and flexibility when it comes to the community that they feel like they trust and care about the work, where you all are able to create solutions together and be led by the community in that way. I see in the chat, Kathleen, perhaps this is about developing allies and relationships in the community and creating collaborative opportunities. In my experience, it is about getting out into the community to explore opportunities through shared aligned values, programs, and missions. We are all in it together to build a better world, aren't we? Yes. Kathleen, absolutely. There's a scarce, we need to abandon the scarcity mindset of we have to do everything all the time, right? The fact there is community and collaborative opportunities and partnerships and allies, like, this is the creation of that exact ecosystem, right? That's the creation of the care that we're talking about. Absolutely. Anybody else has any thoughts, any musings, sharings? I know we're getting down to time.
And
Um,
there's one other comment there from Kristen. Kristen Lovell.
oh,
Just
Kristen, I
above.
see. I just see the added challenges of working in a unionized environment. Absolutely. I want to name that there are different tensions when it comes to the setup and operation of what this looks like, and there are differences in between, like I said earlier, just like the spoon analogy of what is in our power to repair and rebuild while certain structures still exist, and what does it look like for us to be, thank you, Kathleen, what does it look like for us to be um navigating what we can and cannot do in certain instances because there are structures that exist, while also how can we keep community in the center as these structures are still existent. So absolutely. And you can break this down into different areas. You could take one volunteer opportunity and use this framework, or you can take a whole institution and sort of kind of use this framework, just your volunteer program or volunteer engagement strategy, and filter it through here. So there's different ways of being able to connect with it as well. I have some more goodness coming out about this. And so you can definitely connect with me via LinkedIn and let me know that you want to be on the newsletter, and I can absolutely support you there as well. Because this is a lot. This is a lot to like take in. It's a lot to consider. But this is just sort of kind of the appetizer introduction to some of the things that we can really, deep dive into. Any other thoughts, questions?
Probably should tie it together, Brianna. Oh my goodness, you are such an articulate speaker. I could sit here for hours and listen to you. I think rather than being overwhelmed, I liked what you said about just the teaspoon or the tablespoon and try and think of a healthy ecosystem, like a healthy uh, community, like a whole community. Anyway, on behalf of all of us, thank you so, so much. I feel sad for the people who weren't here. We had more signed up. I feel sad for them. It's such a delight having you, and I hope we can have you again. And Ashley, a real welcome to you from Halifax. Oh, we got two new messages. People are saying thank you. Yeah, I'm sure they're jumping off now, but thank you to everyone, and thank you, Brianna. What a privilege to have you.
Yeah, oh no, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And please connect Breauna Dorelus on LinkedIn or even Breauna at connectingthecause.com. That's my email. And Deb, I'll give you that information so you can send it out
Okay.
to folks too.
Okay. Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.